Throughout all of manyl drones, the main goal always was to stop the Absolute Solver. And now that the finale finally dropped, a team was actually able to do so. However, it was never very clear what the Absolute Solver is or what his plans were. However, I see to change this in this video today. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about the solver. As always, it's just a theory and just my opinion, so if you want to disagree, feel free to do so, but also please don't criticize anyone in the comments. Thanks. Hello my little dronies, welcome back to another video. Today's topic: the solver. The Absolute Solver always was more of a mystery to me than anything else, but in the recent days I thought of video topics I could do after the show ended, and I haven't really seen someone try to explain the Absolute Solver anywhere else, except maybe Thank You Bro. But over the last few days I have plastered my wall with different pictures and notes about the solver and connected it all together, and basically it's this picture in a nutshell, but I might have found a solution that I'm going to present you here. Firstly and most importantly, the solver and Cyn are the same, but not the same entity. We learned that throughout the intro of episode 5, because in episode 5 the intro starts glitching and we see some instructional text that most people tend to forget about because it's a very easily to forget thing that happens at the start of an episode and is overshadowed by a lot of other stuff. But in there we get the best information we have so far. And the Absolute Solver program is the program every single drone is using. Either if it's N, it's Uzi, Khan, one of the defenders, everyone is using the Absolute Solver program to know how they can move their arms, how they can talk, how they basically the basic program of the robot. And also what every drone has is a personality core, which is the thing that makes the drones unique. And those two things are constantly fighting with one another. The solver wants to continue the programming as it was programmed to do, while the personality core kind of works like a soul for the drones, because this is what gives a drone his personality and his individuality, because without that core, the drone is just like a giant hive mind controlled by the solver. And the important thing about the core is that it helps all the drones to regenerate, not just the disassembly drones, but even Uzi and even drones that don't even have the solver active can regenerate very quickly, because we have seen with Uzi and N that they can regenerate. But also Thad was stabbed through the chest and was fine afterwards, so all the drones have the capabilities of regeneration. The disassembly drones are just a bit stronger than the others. And because of that insane regenerative capabilities, if one of those robots has to be disposed for any reason, they have to go under a special procedure to make 100% sure that the drones can regenerate after they're being destroyed. Because even though it's unlikely, it's a 1 in 10,000 chance that a drone could wake up again after being destroyed. And this process is being seen by the tape that N found about zombie drones. And zombie drones are basically the normal worker drones with only one change. They already have died and have come back from death. In that case, their cores are able to get a direct connection to the Absolute Solver program, and there's where I have to bring up that the Absolute Solver is just an ordinary program that helps the robot to function, but also is capable of summoning black holes that can rip throughout time and space. But I have to ignore that for a moment until I get to the possible origin of the solver section of the video. But just remember that the solver asks the drone if it's allowed to get access to their bodies, and by confirming, that drone turns into a host. So now it's getting a little bit complicated, as if it wasn't already. By the way, I did mention it, but this video is going to be very complex. But Cyn turned into a host in that moment, and probably because there were no other drones that destroyed entire planets before Cyn, I guess she was the first.
I was the first. I have seen everything.
And there can only be one host at a time. Or better to explain it in this way, I'm going to call Cyn now the Absolute Solver core just so I can explain it to you better. But there only can be one Absolute Solver core, which is Cyn, because she was the first drone that acquired the access to the Absolute Solver's power. And that is why the Absolute Solver adapted the personality of Cyn, because it wasn't the solver, it was Cyn that took control and turned into the solver. And basically the solver works like a black hole at itself. It absorbed Cyn into itself, which means every drone could theoretically be controlled by Cyn, because she's the Absolute Solver core. Her main body can be destroyed, but she can switch hosts around as long as the Absolute Solver core isn't being absorbed by another solver drone, which gets us to the next point. Solver drones are people like Uzi, Doll, and Nori, for example. Those are the people that have access to the Absolute Solver, but are not as powerful as Cyn. And it depends on how much you can control your emotions, but if you're unstable and can control your emotions, like Uzi, Cyn is able to temporarily overpower you and take control over your body. However, if you can properly focus and have control over your emotions like Doll, you can't be controlled by the Absolute Solver core. But now that we got settled how Cyn works, what was her actual plan? What did she try to do if we count out Uzi and the group? So first of all, Cyn died because she was probably abused by the humans like every other drone in Elliot's manor, and all the disassembly drones were once worker drones and those rebooted. It's evidenced by the yellow arm bracelets where they all were marked for disassembly, but Cyn came especially badly damaged back, so this was the first time she got access to the solver and was able to plan stuff. And of course she wanted revenge at first, so while Tessa took her back into the mansion, secretly experimented on other worker drones while she was locked in the basement. And then at the night of the gala, she took her plan into motions, appeared upstairs in the gala and slaughtered everyone. So important to know is episode 5 isn't actually what happened, and also what Tessa said isn't actually what happened, because episode 5 there were future Cyn and past Cyn in the same memory, and also Uzi to change the outcome because N and V never survived this encounter, and V was later turned from a prototype disassembly drone into a full-on fledged disassembly drone. And even though Tessa told us that she was found in the mansion, Tessa was actually also killed on the day because she wasn't staying in the basement and came to the gala where Cyn killed her and took her skin. And later, after some time, Cyn has built up an army of disassembly drones and started going full-on genocide run on the planet Earth, and she was successful. She killed every human on the planet, but of course there were more humans elsewhere, and of course there could be some humans hiding in a back alley or something, so she decided the best course of action was to destroy the planet and use her solver powers to the fullest potential, which in this case she destroyed and absorbed the planet into the black hole we see in episode 6. So we can't be fully 100% sure that that is what happened because Tessa showed us this image, and everything that Tessa said could be a lie because Cyn was the entire time Tessa. But now that Cyn has actually started to absorb the planet, she has probably gotten some form of hunger. It wants her to absorb even more planets, as we see her influence spreading throughout other planets, which probably she was absorbed as well. And now is actually where we get to the interesting part. Cyn always sends the disassembly drones first for two things. Firstly, make all the humans or worker drones living on the planet afraid and start hiding so they can oppose her. And one of the disassembly drones always carries her core. That is seen by Jay, because not as the other disassembly drones, Jay had actually a black hole as a core, which wasn't her core, but was the core of Cyn. Her core was probably somewhere on another ship, or that is why Jay has a second ship where she was able to fly around in episode 6. And this would actually explain the line with good disassembly drones are cloned more often, because Jay wasn't actually cloned, but her real core was hidden in another ship, and the other core with the Eldritch J monster was actually Cyn's core, but because Uzi didn't absorb the black hole that came out of it, she was able to reform her body, and this would explain this entire situation. And as soon as Cyn is on a planet, she finds a host as close to the core as she can go and starts to absorb that and continue that cycle, because her heart is literally a black hole which keeps on consuming and never stops consuming. So that is my educated guess on why Cyn was absorbing planets, because her goal was to kill humanity, and on a planet with no humans, why would she go back there? That is my best guess. And also, just to mention it, the disassembly drones also have kind of the same hunger, but not for planets, but for the resource that oil is made out of, because human blood and oil are kind of made out of the same stuff. So N and the group always needed to eat humans or drones, keep their bodies cool, even though we never saw in the episode any confirmation of that, just that N said it once. And now is the part where I mentioned where the solver could possibly be coming from, because as I have established in the beginning, the Solver and Cyn are two separate entities. However, I don't know if I can call the Solver an entity, because what the Solver even is still the biggest mystery in the show, next to the meaning of the credits, but it is something else. And I think if Liam Vickers would have wanted to solve the Solver, he would have done so in the finale, which makes me believe Liam intentionally written the Solver in a way that it isn't supposed to make sense, it's just the magic system of the universe. But I'm still going to explain everything because this is an explanation video. And what the Solver actually is still extremely confusing, because at one hand it acts like a program that every single drone is using for basic behavior functions. However, Absolute Solver is also capable of ripping time and space apart and summoning black holes and do everything else we can see in the show, which would lead you to believe that the Absolute Solver could be some form of space demon coming from a mirror dimension or something. Again, mirror theory from Pro only can recommend his stuff. But contradictory to that is that if the Absolute Solver would be a space demon, why would the humans intentionally build the drones in a way that they all use the Solver program, but the humans couldn't have built it because they didn't expect them to go rogue and summon black holes all the time? And the question even is if the Absolute Solver is sentient, because whatever you command it, for example destroying a planet, moving a flashlight or anything else, it does. However, it also chooses its host like it did with Cyn, because N and V and J also were destroyed and could have activated the Solver abilities in them and became the Solver core. However, they didn't. The Solver specifically chose Cyn. So if it chose Cyn, it has to be sentient. But again, if it's sentient, why was Cyn able to take over? Possibly my personal opinion would be the Solver is sentient but cannot use its own powers and needs an Absolute Solver core to do that for them. And the only thing the Absolute Solver wants in return is that absorbing of matter itself, or like Cyn does planets. However, there's also the theory flying around that Myrons could get a potential comic series instead of a season 2. But again, if Liam Vickers would have wanted to resolve what the Solver is, I think he would have done it in the finale.
Okay.
So for the future part, I must honestly say it's more to wrap up this whole video with a nice bow that you talk about past, present and future than anything, because Myrons has ended, and although there might be something coming in the future, I doubt we ever get a real explanation of what the Solver will be or what it's capable of. But I certainly would think if Myrons is continued, either through Glitch or fan projects, the Solver will be mainly used as limitless possibilities, because it can already rip holes into time and space. And there was a pretty popular fan theory that the entire universe of Myrons is in a simulation, and that the Absolute Solver is able to hack that simulation. That's why it can influence stuff. And personally, I never liked that explanation, because it would mean that all our favorite characters were never real to begin with, like neither in real life or in the universe that the actual show happened. But what else can be done with the Solver is just up to the writer, because in the end credits we can see what seems to be a new entity, which was confirmed just to be a reference to Doll in episode 3. Sad to disappoint everyone that thought it was a new character or a teaser for something bigger, because literally everybody thought that, because nobody wants that Myrons ends. But also that Cyn and Uzi are now the same entity. It's always a question of how much each one is in control. But I just like to assume that Uzi is now the one in control, and hey, maybe one day Cyn becomes her own body and doesn't try to genocide all the humans again, and then Uzi get a child with the Solver, and then an entire drone population with Solver abilities could pop up. Everything could happen, honestly, because like the Solver, the only thing stopping it is your own imagination, basically. And although it might never be explained, sometimes it's just better to leave the childish imagination alive than to have the adult explain everything and take the joy out of it. But this concludes this video, and honestly, although I didn't have much to say in the end, this was probably my best video so far, if not ever, if I'm going to compare it to the Cyn is a God theory. And it was a bunch of effort to put all of this together. I might have some parts inaccurate, like the hunger of Cyn was never just assumed. There was like 1 or 2 phrases where Cyn said, "I'm starving."
Honestly, I'm starving.
But like, I made it up for storytelling purposes, so we have one conclusive narrative. But overall, I very much like that theory, because it explains why Jay was suddenly back, how Eldritch Jade appeared, and not Eldritch V or Eldritch N or something like that. And in my opinion, it fixes a lot of the plot holes that were open in the finale. And I know probably most of the work I did in this video will go to waste because it won't get many views. So share it around with your friends and maybe drop a like. I would greatly appreciate it. But we see us in the next video. And remember...
Schmuppidi schwupps. Verfickte Scheiße.